Good Sunday morning, everybody. A couple weeks ago, I was talking with Steve Edwards, who anchors Good Day LA, as you all know. We were talking about all sorts of things, and he happened to ask me if I was familiar with a book called Deadly Times. We've got a shot of the cover here. It's a story of the bombing of the Los Angeles Times in 1910, I should say. It's a story that I'm familiar with, first of all, because I love Los Angeles history, and second of all, because I used to work for the Los Angeles Herald Express way back when, which was an arch rival of everything involving the Times. And then we'll come back here to the set. And then Steve asked if I was familiar with the author, Lew Irwin. And of course, then the whole thing lights up in my brain, because if you work in broadcast news in Southern California, you know of Lew Irwin. He has been a reporter, an anchor, an executive, a news executive ever since the mid-1950s. Much of the good things that we can say about television news today are part of his legacy. And you decided to write a book about the Times.
Well, way back when, actually. I interviewed a writer who had written a biography of Clarence Darrow, and that told the story of the bombing of the LA Times. I was unaware that the Times had been bombed, and I had worked at the Times myself way back when I was 17 years old, working for a guy who was writing a sports column there. Had no idea that the Times had been bombed.
If I could interrupt, we've got a photograph that shows there it is. Look at that.
Yeah, it was the worst crime that has been committed in California in its entire history. 20 people killed, over 100 people injured. The worst crime in history ever committed against journalists, period.
But at the core of it is really a dispute over unionism.
Absolutely. The city of Los Angeles was an open shop city. San Francisco was a closed shop city. The two could not exist simultaneously in the same state. And the unionists in San Francisco determined that we're either going to unionize Los Angeles, or we're going to have to cave into the businesses here and have the same salaries that people in LA have. At
the time, the publisher of the Los Angeles Times, and we've got a photograph of him here, was General Harrison Gray Otis. That's the gentleman, the portly gentleman there in the light-colored suit. I think in terms of being a conservative, he would make today's conservatives look like they're off on the far left.
Oh, absolutely, yeah. The man was a terror. And, but very interestingly, he had spent half of his life, more than half of his life, up until he was in his 50s, as just this itinerant going from town to town, working in at various newspapers, just a complete vagabond, really. And came to Los Angeles, bought a piece of the Los Angeles Times when its circulation was 500. And built it into the most powerful organization in the city. And really, the city was built on the Los Angeles Times.
And at the time, wasn't he at the core of a group of business owners who were virulently anti-union?
Yeah, they were determined to keep unions out of Los Angeles by any means necessary. They were responsible for an ordinance that banned picketing. Forget about trying to organize at all. But they rounded up hundreds of people who were engaged in picketing, put them in jail, set the bail so high that they couldn't get out. And it was a terrible tragedy for for the families of all of these hundreds of unionists. And yeah, the people in San Francisco, the union people in San Francisco came down here, and they were determined to try to unionize Los Angeles, and failed.
And we come to the night of, what was the date?
October 1st, 1910.
And there's this explosion, and once again, it was what, 20-something people killed?
At least 20 people killed. We still don't know the exact number. Only 14 were actually identified. There may have been more than 20, but a lot of people were incinerated in the fire that followed the explosion.
After the bombing, there's a fella whose photograph we've got who decided, or was hired to figure out who it was that perpetrated this crime.
Yes, a guy named William Burns. You've probably seen his name on the guard badges at buildings all over the country.
Burns Security.
Burns guards. And he became the first head of the FBI, largely on the notoriety that he built while tracking down the dynamiters.
And ultimately there were two brothers.
That's
Is that James? That's James.
McNamara,
yeah.
Right. He is the one who actually set the bomb at the Los Angeles Times at the behest of the San Francisco Union people.
That's his brother, by the way, John.
He was the secretary-treasurer of the Iron Workers Union.
Yeah.
Now, the Iron Workers Union had set off 150 bombings at least all over the United States in their effort to prevail, given the fact that they were unable to do what unions ordinarily do.
Trying to organize.
Right.
Or they acquired a very controversial defense attorney, and we have a photograph.
Clarence Darrow. He was famous for defending unionists. There was a similar case just a few years earlier where unionists were accused of murdering the ex-governor of Idaho. And he defended the unionists and got them off. So he became, the man to go to. So the AFL immediately went to him. He didn't want to take the case at first. He had been in ill health, didn't want to do it. But they offered him $50,000, a retainer of $50,000.
As they would say back when $50,000 meant something.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that was more than $500,000 at least. And he took the case and came to California and saw immediately that there was no defense. These guys, as he had put it, left evidence a mile wide.
There's another photograph we want to show before we take a break. The fellow in the middle, he was with the AFL or the Iron Workers?
He was the head of the AFL.
Yeah.
Samuel Gompers came to California, went to their cell, proclaimed them innocent, said that they were being framed, and these are my boys, and we're going to stick by them.
I want to wrap up the story before we take a break. Ultimately, General Otis, who's this ultra-conservative guy, he ends up playing a significant role in the fact that neither one of the brothers ended up being executed.
Well, yes. I mean, what had happened was that one of the defense attorneys was a guy named Job Harriman, who was running for mayor at the time and won the primary election. And and he was going to win the general election as well. So when Darrow decided he had no alternative but to plead them guilty, the deal was that he would plead them guilty on election eve, so that Harriman would be defeated, and he was.
But what was the general's role in all of that?
Well, the general was the one who made the final decision. He wanted them to hang.
He was that powerful.
Oh yes, the most powerful man in the city, probably in the city's history. I don't think that Los Angeles has ever had a man as powerful as General Otis.
And the brothers eventually were sentenced to...
Well, J.B. McNamara was sentenced to life in prison, and J.J. McNamara was convicted of ordering the bombing of the Llewellyn Iron Works.
Which was also here in
L.A. That's the reason why he was tried here. I mean, he could have been tried for all sorts of bombings all over the country because he was the man who did all the ordering. And
when he got out of prison, he continued his work, his pro-union work?
Exactly.
If we have piqued your interest in Deadly Times, Lew Irwin's book, you should go to www.studiobriefing.net. There, you can actually order the book there. There's, you can see some of his current work. It's just a great site to go to, www.studiobriefing.net. So we've been, I guess the ultimate question here would be, what do you think of broadcast news today?
It's terrible.
We'll leave it at that. How's that? Thank you, sir.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you.
I've loved it.
Deadly Times is the book. It's a wonderful read, and thank you for being with us. We'll see you next week.